T.
Hi, my name is Uhudi, and in this video I will be showing movement in the game Apex Legends. I will be showing basic and advanced versions of movement and how to utilize them in your gameplay. Let's begin. So, everybody understands what general movement is in a video game, especially a game like Apex. It's rather simple. You press W to run forward. You can even hit a slide to gain increased movement speed, and most people even know how to jump towards the end duration of it. However, there are many mechanics in Apex whenever it comes to movement that not everybody knows or doesn't learn immediately or get the gist of how the mechanics fully work. So the first thing is, whenever you begin to run, you don't actually go from zero movement like I am now to full. It takes approximately about half a second to a full second for your character to gain maximum speed, which is why you will see a lot of people who, whenever they are running and go to do a slide and then a jump to gain more forward momentum as your character accelerates much faster when you do that, so you gain further distance in less time than if you were to just normally run. If people try to do that too early, they get what is called a death slide. That is because your character, after you do this, needs about the 1 second before you can do it again to reattain full momentum. Because if you try to do it too early, your character will get a death slide like so. So in doing that, your character actually loses a bunch of momentum because you try sliding without full momentum. Now, there are different ways to utilize going from zero momentum to basically full momentum, but I will be going into those later. For now, I will be discussing some of the more uh, need to be known mechanics about movement before we actually get in how to fully utilize it. So, for example, not everybody knows this, surprisingly, but characters like Wraith, Watson, Pathfinder, and Lifeline, who are all low-profile characters, even though they are more difficult to hit and they get a damage increase, it does not show down here that it does this, but if you are a low-profile character and you get shot at, your character actually loses momentum upon being shot. So, if I was to run and do a slide jump like that, but somebody were to shoot me as soon as I crouch down, I would basically do a death slide and end up like this because I would lose all momentum within being shot and then crouching. So it is important to note that when you are playing these characters, to try to only do advanced movement tech or a slide jump or even like a wall jump, etc., when you are not being shot at or are able to dodge the bullets well enough. Another way that movement mechanics are in the game that not everybody knows about, if you actually fall off of a large height, which if you've played the game and you've fallen off of a large height a couple of times, you have realized that your character gets slowed. For example, if I were to fall off of, say, a height like this onto the ground, I can continue with full momentum rather quickly. But at a higher height, like this, or say on top of that, whenever you fall down, and if you have a wheezy stomach, please look away. If you fall all the way down, it actually takes a second for your character to begin to start moving because you land and you have about a solid second where you are actually slowed and gain momentum at a much slower rate. Now that we have gone over some of the basic mechanics for how movement works in Apex, like death slides, how momentum actually works, and how you can gain and lose momentum in Apex, let us get over some of the simple and most people know or would like to know movement tricks in the game. Now, one of the most common and most used movement techs, and though it is not as good as it was whenever the game first came out, it can still be very useful in many situations or even just to entertain yourself when running from battle to battle, and that would be the popular bee-hopping. Now, luckily for us, bee-hopping in Apex Legends is nowhere near as difficult as it is in games like Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So, if you are unaware and have not done bee-hopping before, the easiest ways to be the most successful and/or master bee-hopping is to change the jump bind if you are on keyboard and mouse to a scroll wheel. And for myself personally, I use scroll wheel up and spacebar just for personal preference from time to time whenever I'm not bee-hopping. So, once you have it bound to a scroll wheel or whichever button you feel you could most likely spam or press at the appropriate time, the way to time bee-hopping is right before your character actually lands and hits the ground, you want to scroll up or you want to press whatever your jump button is. So, for example, you would like to start at going a full forward momentum, crouch slide, and then whenever you land on the ground like so, just begin bee-hopping. Right before your character hits the ground, just continuously keep hitting the jump button. And you can go into the firing range and you can learn this and you can practice. And you can actually go from slower momentum to fuller momentum. For example, if I start like this, I can actually begin to gradually raise momentum until I actually go at a full speed. Because as you can see, based on where I started, I am now going at the faster speed and a more accelerated rate. So bee-hopping is not as useful as it used to be, as there are many things that can actually hinder your bee-hopping speed. For example, if you are a low-profile character, whenever you get shot at if you are bee-hopping, you will actually essentially come to a full steady crouch. And if you are healing, you will actually go a lot slower to the point that most people would argue it is actually better to just essentially walk unless you are running from in a gunfight and you are afraid of being shot at. Then the best course of action obviously would be to try to bee-hop around cover while healing. This will make you much harder to hit, especially if you are a smaller or taller character, as whenever you are a tall character, as let's say Pathfinder, whenever you crouch, you actually go the same crouch distance. So you are the same crouch spot as if you were to play a small character like Wraith. You both crouch down to the exact same height. So even if you are playing a super tall character, it is actually much harder to hit you if you crouch down because you become super small. So when running away from gunfire, it can of course arguably be better to just bee-hop out of cover. Now, one of the more advanced piece of movement tech that I will be going over is the climb sliding. Now, the reason why this would be considered more advanced is because it can be rather easy to learn and to actually get pretty consistently until you are actually in gameplay and you are at the heat of the moment. A lot of people tend to do it too early or panic and mess it up. So, easy to learn, hard to do under immense pressure, at least at a consistent basis. But once you master it, you will be doing this so often to where you hardly ever even realize it. And this can be done off of basically any height in the game as long as your character does not have a full climb animation. So, for example, I can do it off of this height, or I can do it off of this height. There's many different heights it can be done off of. And so, for example, the normal climb, slide, versus if I were to go up and just walk across, takes a lot more time to go across. So you can gain a lot of forward distance from the opposition or the people that are chasing you when doing this. And how we are actually going to perform the climb slide is once you climb up, the easiest way to time it is when your character takes their first step, you want to immediately slide and just let your character go flying forward. So, climb, first step, slide. Climb, first step, slide. Climb, first step, slide. Now if you let your character go too long, obviously, yes, you can still do it, but you lose on time if you don't do it within the first step. Because you can do it and go full speed within the very first step. But if you do it too early, you will get things like that. If you do it just too early, you'll get little, basically I call it like ankle breakers on yourself, where your character will just come to a dead stop or they won't go the full speed like before. However, once you master it, it is actually extremely simple to learn and to actually utilize in gameplay, and you will be doing it more often than you would expect. So, again, climb, first step, slide. And there you go. One of the quickest and easiest ways to gain distance in Apex isn't even that hard at all. So another piece of movement tech that I'm going to show is pole climbing. And pole climbing can actually be extremely useful. However, even some of the most veteran players or movement god players can have a hard time doing pole climbing, as it can be a little janky or weird to do, and it is really hard to do at a very consistent basis. You are almost guaranteed to mess it up out of like 20 times at least once, no matter how good you are at movement. It's a very difficult thing to do at a super high consistent rating. And the way to actually pole climb and what it is, for example, I'm going to maneuver myself around this pole, starting from the opposite side of where this junk gate is, and be on top of that junk gate from here. And I'm going to do that by jumping on, latching on to the pole that is in front of me, holding W, and since I wanted to move to the left, I was holding the A key and W key combined, and I then followed the object that I am climbing and kept it in the middle of my screen as much as I possibly could. And in doing so, your character will actually proceed to continue to climb and move around it until he or she gets exhausted, because your character can only climb for so long before they get exhausted and let go. So again, you are just going to jump, hold W if you want to move to the left, hold A if you want to move to the right, hold D, and keep whatever object you are climbing in the middle of your screen until you get to wherever you wish. And for me, that is on the other side on top of that junk gate. Now again, this can be rather difficult, so don't expect yourself to be able to do it extremely efficiently or at a super high rating, and just practice it as much as possible, as it can be extremely hard to actually learn and to master. So do not get frustrated, just sit in the firing range and practice this, and once you have it down, then buildings like Streamer Building, Broken Building, and many of the Olympus houses, you can actually utilize pole climbing to your advantage to gain height without being seen, or doing a alternative route that not many people would expect you to take and not many people would expect you to actually come from. So you can use it toward the element of surprise or many other different types of techs. Definitely something worth learning and something that is not that hard to learn. However, it is hard to do at a highly consistent basis. So again, do not get frustrated if you have a hard time. Just keep practicing and keep trying to do it as much as possible. Now I will get into the most well-known and common piece of movement tech that I would consider in the advanced category, and that is the wall jump. Most people know what a wall jump is or have seen somebody do it, whether it be a friend or a veteran player or done it by themselves on accident. A wall jump is essentially your character what seems like jumping off of the wall, hence the name wall jump. So this is what it looks like in a first person's perspective, and it can actually be very useful in gameplay, as not a lot of people are going to expect you to do a wall jump when engaging in combat, or if you are running away, as it makes yourself harder to hit, and it is very flashy. And a lot of the time, it shows players that you have a good understanding of the game and understand movement when they see you do it. I know myself personally, when I see someone wall jump, I immediately know, okay, this person at least has a general idea of what they're doing. So, one of the more underrated things that a lot of people see for it is the intimidation factor, as whenever you see a player wall jump, it isn't really that common to see people be able to successfully wall jump. So, as weird as it may sound, it can be intimidating, and it can help you get out of combat while running away, use that as evasive maneuver, or actually engage into combat, which is my personal favorite. So, the way we are actually going to wall jump is quite simple. We are going to run towards a wall, whether it be on the right side or the left side of us, and we are going to, once we run up, we are going to flick our mouse over, do a crouch jump. So a lot of the time it's going to want to be a slide. And then once your character is in the air, you want to let go of W. This is very important that you let go of W. So whenever you are going to the right, it's going to be crouch. Hold on to the button that you are going to want to strafe with. So if it is to the right, once I scroll up or press spacebar, whatever your jump key is, to go up into the air, I am going to strafe D to go right, or if I was going onto a left wall, it would be A to go left, to make your character latch onto the wall without holding W. And the gist of how to actually land the wall jump, once you understand to not press W once your character has jumped, like so. Do not press W, and your character will then essentially latch onto the wall. And as soon as your character latches, if you are wanting to jump off of a right wall, a lot of the time you are going to just want to go forward. So you are going to flick and jump right off as soon as your character latches on, and you are going to flick your mouse in the direction that you would wish to go. So if you would wish to go forward, you would flick it to the left, and you would hold A to the direction that you wanted to go. So if I wanted to go left, I would flick my mouse left after scroll wheel jumping off, and I would hold A as well to go flying over in that direction. If it was from a left wall, it would be D once I go on. So slide A to latch on, jump right back off, hold D, and flick my mouse over. So to run that down and simplify it, run, slide, jump, and flick your mouse over towards the wall, let go of W, latch on, jump right off as soon as you can tell your character latches on, flick your mouse to the direction you wish to go, and hold the button in the direction of that angle. And so yes, you can go either from a right wall or you can go from a left wall doing a wall jump. However, you can also just straight up jump backwards, or you can go any different type of which way that you want. Once you learn how to do it, well enough, you can just flick your character over to the direction that you wish to go. So you can do little things like this is a
I'm going over
more
here.
common
Let's
practice.
go this way.
I will wall jump off of this wall onto this rock. It's rather
Forget that.
simple, but this is a good way to actually practice utilizing and using your wall jump once you actually learn the wall jump. So again, we are going to run towards the wall, slide, jump, hold the direction we want to turn, let go of W, latch on. As soon as our character is latched on, scroll wheel off, still not holding W, and then holding the direction we would wish to go. Rather simple. I know it's a lot to take in, but it is really simple, and once you have done it a couple of times, you will get it down pretty quickly. Now, though it is easy to actually learn once you get it down, it is hard to maintain consistency and to master this, especially in gameplay. If you are learning it and you're able to do it rather consistently in the firing range or in a practice environment, a lot of people will get frustrated because they'll still be messing it up in game. That is because there's a lot more different variables and it takes a really long time to actually master wall jumping. Even myself, as somebody who takes pride in their movement abilities, even I mess up wall jumping a lot more times than I would like to admit. So do not get frustrated. Nobody is perfect. Just practice and try to build your consistency up with wall jumping as well as you possibly can. And then you can do things like that. Just simple little things that you can practice in the firing range, and you can jump off of many different obstacles, even
Might be
little
something good
things
this
like
way.
this. You can just do all types of different movement techs once you have the wall jumping down to further test yourself in your accuracy with your wall jumps. And now we are going to get into the wall jump climb cancellation. This is, in my opinion, one of the best movement techs to actually know, can save your life more times than you would think, but you don't really ever see people using it because of the fact of how difficult it can be, especially in a stressful situation. And I will show you how to do it after I explain why it is so useful. So, for example, if I was running from, say, enemies that were up here
Contact.
shooting at me, or up
Time to
here,
pick a
or
fight.
some
Gonna spy on
snipers
that area.
on height, and
Cancel
I
that.
were to want to climb up this to be behind cover, during this entire climb animation, I can be shot at very easily as I am essentially stationary, just climbing up the wall. I can't strafe to the left or to the right. Shaking my head doesn't do anything about my character's position or the movement. But if you are actually able to learn the wall jumps and master them, you can strafe yourself on top of or even over a wall to completely cancel out a climb animation, which when doing this, I could jump off
Looking
of
for some
here
loot here.
and land
Going
on
to
top
check
of
out right
here to actually go really fast, making myself a lot harder to track, and I'm already basically over the wall by the time they realize what's going on, creating no animation and actually giving myself a lot more time to get where I need to and to confuse the enemy. Now, as you can see, I did kind of hit the wall a little bit there, so I lost a little bit of my momentum, but it is really hard to actually do and to master. So if it takes you a while to actually utilize it into gameplay, or even to be able to do it successfully in the firing range, do not worry. It is very hard to learn, and once you master it though, it can be extremely useful, especially in gameplay and in combat when you are running from enemies and so on and so forth. Now, the way we are actually going to want to do this is do a simple wall jump off where you would flick to the left if you were wanting to go off off of a right wall, but then immediately from pressing A, where you would normally just carry it on and be flicked over there, you are going to want to flick back to the opposite direction and press the opposite key. So it is another step included, but it is going to be a flick off of the wall and then immediately flick right back and strafe onto the wall. And it has to be done a lot faster than a normal wall jump, which is also something that makes it extremely hard. As you see, you can barely even see whenever I flick over to the left because I'm flicking back over to the right so quickly. So you are going to, again, want to run, slide, jump, latch on, jump back off, hold the key, and then flick right back over to the wall that you are wanting to go over. I know that can sound like a lot to take in and too many steps, or it can be difficult, but trust me, it is not really as difficult as people would make it out to be, or as threatening as it can seem on the surface. Just give it a little bit of time, and learning how to wall jump, climb, animation cancel can actually save your life many times and can be extremely useful when in combat and when trying to escape from enemies. Now on to one of the more advanced piece of movement tech in Apex, and something that everybody has at least seen someone do or has attempted to learn it in the past, and that of course is zipline jumping. Now, it is not as useful to know how to zipline jump anymore as it used to be with the zipline changes, as now you can only latch on to the zipline about 3 times before your character is no longer able to latch on to the zipline fast enough for it to actually be useful. So, if you are able to learn and master this, you can still use zipline jumping and those 3 jumps that you are allowed before you land on the ground very well, especially on maps like World's Edge, where there's streamer building, broken building, and other places where there's just zip lines, especially if you are being chased or you are trying to chase after somebody to make yourself less noticeable or harder to hit. So, for example, that is the 3. However, I could not latch back onto the 4th for the 4th time. So the way that we are actually going to do this is as soon as you grab on, like I had shown before with the zipline jumping, it is going to be essentially the same thing. We are going to grab, turn around, grab again, and of course we are going to flick off as soon as we grab. So grab, flick off, turn around, try to match up with the zip line, grab, flick off, turn back around again, and grab and flick off. So you are basically grabbing, flicking, 180, grab, flick, 180, grab, flick. So that is the key, and it is really hard to do. So if it takes you a long time to actually do it successfully, do not fret, as if I were to sit here and try to do it 3 times in a row, I guarantee you, even I, and someone who practices movement all the time, would mess it up, as it is still extremely hard to actually master and use constantly in gameplay. So if it takes you a while to learn how to do it, do not worry, but it is rather simple and extremely useful in actual gameplay. So please give it a chance, and once you have it down, it will serve you very well in game. So one last time, just grab on, Click 180, grab, flick, and as you could see, even though I made it back around the 4th time, I could not grab onto it again. So, there you have it. That is how you zipline jump. It takes a long time to learn and a much longer time to master. So don't get aggravated with yourself. Take your time. Now let us move on to something that is also rather easy to learn and more common. However, though it is common and extremely useful, I rarely see people ever actually utilize this in gameplay, but I will be going over times where I personally have utilized it in gameplay or how you can utilize it in gameplay. And I am of course talking about zipline high jumping. Now, I did that off of pressing a solid 2 buttons. I gained all that distance from here all the way forward to here. Now, doing this is actually extremely simple. And if you had followed from before with the B-hopping scroll wheel up or using scroll wheel in general as one of your jump keys, this will not be nowhere near as difficult as if you were using, like, say, space. So what essentially needs to be done here is as soon as you press E to latch on to the rope, you essentially need to immediately disengage with your scroll wheel without looking away or pressing any other buttons. So whichever direction you are looking is the direction you will go flying in. So just walk up, hit E, and immediately disengage. And you will go flying, and it can actually gain so much forward momentum, distance, and if you combine it with other stuff that we will be going over later on, you can actually use it to gain a lot of momentum and become a lot harder to shoot and a lot less predictable, because you can just change it on people at any time. And it's rather simple. Just one more time, run up to it, E, disengage, or whatever your interact key is. Just as soon as you press it, remember to disengage rather immediately. Now towards something more general, but I feel like definitely belongs in a movement video as it is based around the movement in the game. And that is, of course, combat movement, and this has slightly to do with positioning, but I will get into that later. So what I mean by combat movements in Apex is when in a firefight or in a 1v1, a lot of people's initial instinct obviously is to AD. That is the initial instinct, and that is good. This is what you want to do. However, a lot of people either do it super quickly, or they do long strafes, or they crouch spam a little bit, but they keep it at a pattern to where a super good player or a veteran player who has been playing for a while can read this pattern and is able to track you as they've tracked it before on other players many times. So my simple advice for that is to switch it up. Do a mixture of long strafes, short strafes, and crouches versus non-crouching whenever you're actually in a gunfight. However, of course, this is going to make it a lot harder for you to actually track your target as well, but you actually know which direction you're going and what you're thinking rather than your target knowing. Now, the other things that go into strafing is, and not a lot of people know this, the gun you are using when scoped in actually, believe it or not, does reduce your movement speed. So, no matter the gun you are using, when you are no scoping, you move at max speed. You move at the full speed, la-di-da, doesn't matter. You have the fastest crouch and strafe rather than if I was scoping in. Let's say this G7 here. See how I immediately become a lot slower than if I was scoped out. And it makes me a lot more stationary and a lot easier of a target to hit. So be careful where you are scoping in. Even with submachine guns, you become a little bit slower than if you were to no scope. So the heavier the gun, the slower you actually move when you are scoped in. Remember this. So obviously, LMGs or weapons like the Kraber, you're going to move the slowest. Assault rifles is going to be the second. SMGs, you are still going to lose speed. However, weapons like the RE45 and the Wingman, you actually lose no speed when scoping in compared to if you were no scoping, which is why weapons like the Wingman, you can actually still move at ridiculous speeds because it is essentially like you are not scoping in at all, as pistols have no movement speed reductions. So it is important to remember that when going up against somebody with a submachine gun or even say a wingman, if you are closer, it may not be as good of an idea to scope in if you have, say, like a flatline, and be better to hip fire, try to track them, and use your own strafe pattern. This way you move at a faster speed, and the person in front of you is not moving much faster than you, making it much harder on your end to actually out-aim them. Now, the last piece of tech, or I wouldn't even really call it tech, this is what I was talking about when I meant positioning, that I see a lot of players messing up on and getting themselves into. Realize your LOS. And by LOS, it is a quote unquote fancy term for line of sight. Understand where you are visible when you are in a gunfight and where you are at. Now, obviously, understanding your surroundings and your line of sight will come more with time played. However, even a lot of veteran players sometimes seem to not fully utilize their surroundings or understand what their line of sight is. For example, say if I was to get in a fight with this dummy over there and I didn't see his friend over there, well, then I'm going to get shot in the side. Or let's say there's another team third partying. I can be shot from any direction, literally any firing range aside from cover like this. But let's say, for example, I see this dummy here, and before I engage, I run behind this, and then I start shooting. Well, if his buddy over here on the right starts shooting at me, I can back up and I am immediately in a 1v1 engagement with him, where the line of sight on my left and my right is cut to a large margin. While yes, of course, I can be shot anywhere from up here or even over there, but it is a lot more likely I will see them with my peripheral vision, have a lot more time to react, or if I get shot in the back, there are a lot less areas for me to actually be seen, or I'm a lot harder to hit than if I am standing in the wide open like here. Knowing your line of sight and getting yourself in a position where you can see your enemy and people around you are going to have a much harder time seeing you can actually save you a lot. And this is where a lot of people will mess up, is they will not pay attention to their actual surroundings, see an enemy and just want to engage, not caring about their line of sight at all. So keep in mind your ADS, your strafing, and your line of sight when engaging in movement combat, as well as utilizing all of the movement text that I have shown you so far in the video. Now, I am going to move on to clips of myself using these movement texts in gameplay and how they can actually be used towards your advantage. So the final piece of movement tech that I would put in the common category, though it barely made it here, as I could see this being extremely difficult for a lot of people to actually utilize into gameplay, is of course the combat sliding at a good speed. Now this is more so good for when you are actually in combat. So if you are, for example, say in a gunfight and I'm fighting somebody here and I'm doing my AD crouch spamming, and let's say I wanted to spice it up a little bit and I wanted to just slide on him. if you're fighting somebody, you're doing all this, and then all of a sudden you just slide on them, they're not really going to expect it that much, and they're going to have to position themselves. And a lot of the time, people are going to stop ADing, and they're going to go in a diagonal direction with you, meaning you have a lot easier of a time following them than they will you. So, in the way that I am doing this is I am gaining decent momentum, and then of course I am just jumping and sliding and holding whichever button in the direction I'd want to go. If I want to go left, obviously I would hold A, and I can go behind cover if I feel like I'm losing the gunfight, while never disengaging in the actual combat or line of sight until I am clear out of sight. You can do this in any direction that you so please. A number of different variety of ways can be done with this to get yourself either into cover or out of cover. It can be rather useful. However, really hard to utilize this in the gameplay, and even some of the most veteran players don't use it. However, a lot of people do, and when they do, it can be pretty deadly. So I figured I should throw it in there. Now, here is actually a rather good clip of how to utilize some of the movement that I have taught so far. So as you see, I flick over, I see that Pathfinder, and I hit some lucky shots on him, and I see this Bangalore is going for the res. So I immediately climb over when I notice that she popped the smoke and is likely going for the res, do the climb slide over to gain a lot of momentum to where I am essentially already sitting on top of them, to where as you can see, even the Bangalore did not expect me to get over there that quickly and in that amount of time, and because all she had heard was landing and a little bit of running, she did not have much time to react. Though she weirdly held the res, I then afterwards, while finishing them, did not move off of the place where I was at between the two bins in case their horizon that I knew was at my left side decided to start shooting, as she would more likely hit the supply bins rather than myself. This is just one of the examples of of utilizing some of the movements in the gameplay that I have taught so far. Now this is another clip of me utilizing some of the movement tech that I have taught in this video so far rather well, actually. Right after the fight with the Horizon Bangalore Pathfinder team, this was another team coming after us, and as you can see, I immediately went and I gained height on this Wraith, allowing me to get a free wingman shot in and her having to climb up to me, where I was then able to fight her and getting the first engagement. However, she was a very good player and was able to wingman me and do about as much damage as I did to her. So I slide here, I grab the armor, and because I had done the running slide over to this Wraith, I was out the door a lot faster than she had anticipated, causing her Q to be a little far behind. However, I missed some of my shots, so I did not capitalize on it. Now, here is where I utilized some movement pretty well. I see the Wraith is running. I notice that she is going for the rock whenever I climb over, so I do the climb slide to gain a large amount of distance to where there's no way that she would expect me to already be next to her on this rock. And evidence of that is her climbing on top of the rock, trying to look for me, climbing over the wall when I am already next to her, giving me the element of surprise against this Wraith. Now, I see this Gibraltar coming up after me, and so my immediate thought is, where is their third? So as you can see, I see that he is coming to engage me, and I back up to the right side of the wall, of the rock, so it's covering my right side, so I know that me and this Gibby are essentially in a 1v1 situation. I hit some lucky shots with my wingman because of course it is Gibby, and I am able to down him. And then, of course, there is the horizon. If I had peeked out, she would have been able to shoot me as well. And as you can see with how low the Gibby had got me, that could have cost me that fight and potentially even that even that squad kill. Now, I of course later died to a super good grenade by the Horizon. However, this is an example of me utilizing the uh, climb slide to get the element of surprise on this Wraith here, and then using LOS on this Gibraltar who insisted on fighting me to get some more good damage in and actually getting myself in a fair 1v1 against him. These are some of the other ways to utilize movement in gameplay. So this is a good clip of actually a tale of good and bad. So at the beginning of this clip, I utilized some movement in capitalizing on my surroundings towards my advantage, and in the way that I do that is I get in this fight with this Bangalore here. I realize that I am out of position. Both of my teammates are rather far back behind me, so I know I'm pushed up super far and they are healing. So I immediately go for my Q. However, so I am not left open like a sitting duck, I walk towards the door to attempt to block the door so they cannot open it while I am using my Q, as using race Q takes a little while. And as you see, the Bangalore is not able to get out of the door because of this. However, the Caustic was able to, but that eliminated them being able to push out on me, giving me a little bit of time to get away and then to actually reset with my team. Now, that was an example of actually utilizing my surroundings towards something good, but then here is a huge lapse of judgment and a mistake on my part that actually almost cost us the entire fight. As you can see, I see that my Loba gets super low, so I turn around to help her. We start getting shot at by a caustic, and instead of backing up towards the left side of the wall where my Loba is, or positioning myself somewhere closer to the ledge here to where I could easily climb over and do a climb slide if somebody was to shoot me from behind, I stand wide open to where the door is open behind me and I could be shot at any moment, and I have LOS of anybody here. And that does begin to cost me as somebody comes up from behind me and begins to shoot at me. However, they luckily missed enough bullets for me to be able to get away. However, my lapse of judgment of standing super far open, leaving myself exposed from the door behind me, literally almost cost me a life and me to go down in this game. That is an example of where actually using LOS could have saved me and where even myself made a lapse of judgment. Here are two final engagements that we had at the end of this match where I open up with shooting at this Loba, where this is the portal that I had placed earlier when I ran from the Bangalore whenever I used LOS poorly in my case. Now, I open up with fighting this Loba, not wanting to move far away from my wall, so I know that if necessary, I have cover to fall back on very quickly. However, once I see I do a lot of damage, I come out, I shoot a couple of wingman shots, and when I'm using my portal as a sort of distortion and something to use as cover, this Bangalore was not able to necessarily hit me that much, but the second that I actually walked out of the portal area and am left open in a wider LOS range, she completely shreds me and almost kills me. So again, a place where I could have had better LOS that could have saved a lot of life, and luckily it didn't cause me death. Now, I go and I swap the armor because I realize that we have one down and we need to continue the engagement. So I immediately gain height, as height is a huge advantage. And upon climbing on height, I engage with the Bangalore, flick over to the Loba, go back to the Bangalore, and then that team is luckily dead. So the things to take from that engagement is whenever I peeked out, whenever I was fighting the Loba at first, I did not move far away from my cover, so that way I knew that there was less areas for me to be shot at because I have wall covering me here, and I have this portal as a sort of cover and a distortion where I'm much harder to see. And then once I get a little cocky and I push out, it almost costs me my life because I give up my LOS where I could have moved further towards this angle where the Bangalore had to have pushed out in a more open angle where it would have been easier for me to shoot her and or my teammates, or backed up and stayed behind my cover where I would have had a better position. Now, we got lucky and we won that engagement, and immediately the other team was there to fight us. Now, after popping a quick Phoenix kit and all of my teammates healing, we repositioned for the engagement, and I immediately pick out, take some shots at this Loba here, and again, staying beside cover as much as possible for my LOS. Now, I see this Octane, so I immediately flick up, scope out after going towards the left, so that way I would have a faster movement speed to strafe to the right, and then I scoped back in and did some quick left-right AD spamming to try to cause him to miss the shot or be a little off, which, as you can tell, didn't really work out that much for me. However, it did take him a while to line up these shots, giving me enough time to crack him and do even a little bit of health damage. Now I hit some lucky wingman shots here, and as you can see, I got a full down and saw 3 different people, but staying behind the wall of cover that I had, I barely took any damage, even taking a sentinel shot. Now, I peek back out here and I hear the lifeline res that is going on, so I immediately run, obtain height. I get shredded by this Loba's Mastiff. However, my teammates luckily had her low. And again, this is just another position where my teammates are being shot at and I am being ignored because I am on top of height. I slide and jump over this lifeline to confuse her, and my lifeline is in front, so now she's being shot from the front and the back and likely has no idea. And we get the easy dub. This is again just a raw example of actually using line of sight and how much of an advantage it can really have in combat and using your movement correctly. Now this here is a rather good clip of some LOS, really more than anything. Now, I get this super lucky grenade on this horizon who just so happened to run into it, and I'm fighting this Loba here as soon as I peek around this corner, and she is not able to hit me at all, even though she would have if I had kept moving to our right, and then I would have been able to be shot by the lifeline as well. However, because of LOS, I immediately moved to the left to be behind this wall, allowing me to almost down her and also be able to avoid the lifeline, however, not that arc star. Now, I hear that they're going for the res here, so I go around to the other side, reload my gun. I do the slide jump, and I am here a lot sooner than that lifeline expected. As you can tell, she is still running, and I am even able to get off the first. How many shots is that in a row? Because I caught her with the element of surprise. I am able to get 3 shots to her 1 because of the fact that I solely had the element of surprise. And because, of course, I have an assault rifle and I know the ADS speed, I hip fired and I just tracked her. And then I get this lucky shot on the Loba while proceeding to try to stay behind as much cover as possible for my LOS. And in doing so, I am able to secure 2, where I then do the play of running outside and hiding on the door, waiting for backup rather than chance myself going down and getting thirsted. And we get the team wipe, securing that building. Now this is another pretty good clip of a lot of line of sight and some small little movement text here and there. So we just took the car over the hole, and I immediately decided to claim height, as obtaining height is literally the best thing that you can do in Apex where possible. Obtain height. I then come down here and I am a greedy person for damage, so I immediately go for the thirst on that their Caustic or Gibby. I believe it was a Gibby. I see that my Loba goes down here, so I immediately climb up so that way I would have level LOS with this horizon. My lifeline proceeded to just absolutely destroy her with that grenade, and I then see that we are down one. She's being rezzed. There's a bunch of nades, so I make the quick split-second decision to place down a portal after doing a very small amount of damage on their lifeline. Our Loba gets downed to the grenades while she was being rezzed. I placed the portal. I assumed my lifeline was able to cut back to the portal. However, I had a miscommunication on my part where she was being shot at and she could not make it to the portal. So that was a miscommunication on my part and an error that could have cost us the team fight actually. However, luckily she was able to manage to get to the portal. I stuck the open revive because I knew that I needed to get the revive off as quickly as possible before they realized where that portal had gone, and this was the best solution, which is why I decided to res, even though literally there was LOS to shoot me from almost every direction. That was one of those situations where it's basically you have to choose the lesser evil. And so I proceed to come back. We don't have much time on our lowest banner. Again, I'm constantly gaining high ground, so that way while I'm reloading, they cannot see me, but whenever I want to engage, I can see them. Now, I do a little bit of poking damage here on their caustic and their lifeline. I notice that there's only a couple of seconds left on our lowest banner, so I do a slide jump down to gain a lot of forward momentum to basically already be halfway there to her banner. A lot of distance. That is a lot of distance from just a simple slide jump off of height, and there wasn't even really a move slow, so I still maintained full momentum when I landed on the ground. I see their caustic and their lifeline healing. I do a little bit of damage. He gets the battery off. That was a really smart play on his part. So I then grab her banner to maintain LOS while I was going through the banner grab animation. I go by the trees, causing me to only get shot roughly about once. So again, utilizing your LOS, I do a slide jump out so he wouldn't expect me to just walk around where I take a bunch of damage, causing him to only hit me about one more time again. And then I am able to do a decent amount of damage to him, climb on top of the car, and instead of doing a slide jump over, I decided to just do a normal jump because he was a big character and I was afraid of bumping into his head. And in doing so, he was not able to tell where I was at. I get the lucky down, their lifeline goes back. I hear that the portal is up there, so I immediately go to pop a battery, and of course, I'm thinking of LOS. I know that even if I'm hiding in this, if I'm hiding in this tree, even people coming up behind me are gonna have a hard time seeing me, giving me enough time to react. So I then reload. I move away from this arc star here. I go over to the complete other side. I get in a little bit of a battle with this lifeline who does a lot of damage to me. Really good on her part. I take a repeat on her. I go to pop a shield cell. I realize my lifeline is getting shot at. I hear the portal being taken, so weird play by the lifeline's part, but I get a free down on her. Realize that my lifeline goes down, but she says that the wraith is low, so I just immediately run out with the anticipation that she is low. I see the wraith, and instead of jumping straight into her, I do a strafe backwards to the left, so that way she would have a lot harder of a time tracking me whenever she saw me. This was again just a quick split second decision play to do that. I follow her. I do the slide jump to catch up with her, and then of course I see her and make the play to shoot her in the toes there, allowing me to get the quick kill where during the duration of all of that, I only popped roughly about one battery and a cell, all because of LOS manipulation. This will be the last clip so as to not get repetitive, but here is a way later in the day when I was playing Bangalore that I actually used movement to completely bamboozle and get the element of surprise on literally all three members of the enemy squad while they're distracted on my team through fast movement. Now also I am playing Bangalore, who, when she gets her passive, is the fastest character in the entire game. So I get my passive here. I realize that there is an enemy down here, so I do a slide and then jump. I get way over him because I bounce off of his head. And so I am behind him to the point that he is confused, throws his ult towards my friendlies, even though I am behind him. Throw a smoke in the middle here. I get my passive again. So because I have my passive and I landed on the ground with a slide, I did not lose momentum when I landed on the ground, even though it was a high fall where normally you would have, because I landed it with a slide because of my forward momentum. So I was able to catch the Pathfinder off guard, who clearly had no idea that I was there and was not ready for me, giving me a literal entire free spray into his chest, and through all the chaos and my speed run through, distracted by my lifeline, I am able to come up beside the Wraith and get yet another kill, shooting them in the side. The only person that I really engaged during that fight, realistically for more than 2 seconds, was basically the Caustic, who was busy throwing his ult because he was surprised by the fact that I got behind him and panicked. So these are some of the ways that once you learn even the most basic of movement mechanics in the game, how devastating and powerful they can actually be in the full game. Hi, my name is Awudi, and in this video I will be telling you ways to improve in general in the game of Apex Legends. However, things that will be excluded from this video will be things like movement, knowing your line of sight, and even utilizing some of your surroundings, because all of this has already been covered in my movement tutorial video, where I go in depth in movement, whether it be general movement or combat movement, and how to better position and move yourself in general and while in combat. So if you would like to practice on either of those two subjects, then go ahead and click the link below in the description. And without further ado, let's figure out how to get better in general. So the first thing we are going to want to get into is some of the mechanics that are basically Apex exclusive, and then mechanics that are in essentially every game, in every FPS game that's been made. And so the first mechanic that we are going to get into that is basically a Apex exclusive is something that I would assume everybody and their mother knows by this point, and that is, of course, armor swapping. Super simple. People learn it within their first like 5 hours. However, I still felt the need to mention it here. Essentially, what armor swapping is, if let's say this is a full Evo shield and I take a little bit of damage from a grenade. So let's say I am fighting an enemy, they throw a thermite grenade, and I take a little bit of damage. Instead of proceeding to heal with a shield cell, if I'm in the middle of a gunfight and I lose a lot of shield, I can just easily swap that armor and be right back to where I was at instantly, without having to heal and giving myself the advantage in a lot of situations. And you can armor swap off of death boxes if they are full, and the only thing to really be cautious about when armor swapping is swapping from a good Evo shield to a gold armor actually requires you to hold E instead of just hitting it, as it would require for you to the same if you were to try to equip a Evo shield from gold armor. Now, if you were to go from, say, a purple Evo to a red Evo, it does not require you to hold down left click and you can instantly swap it. It is only with gold armor. So if you are swapping to gold, remember you must hold down left click or E. That can get many people killed. Another mechanic in the game that needs to be known, and this one is more so in every FPS game, is jiggle peeking. Now, almost everybody knows what jiggle peeking is, but nobody knows really exactly how to utilize it very well in Apex, as it can be pretty hard and it is mostly only ever done with shotguns, because the servers in Apex Legends are 24 tick servers. So that being said, the chance to jiggle peek is actually extremely high. So let's say I wanted to hit this target, giving him as little a chance of hitting me as possible. I can just jiggle peek him like so, moving out of cover for a split second to see him, shoot, and then move back into frame, or back into my cover. This is what we would call FPS games a jiggle peek, where you essentially jiggle out for half a second to shoot at them, giving them barely any time at all to shoot back at you, giving you the full advantage. However, using a jiggle peek is really in Apex only possible with a one-shot type weapon, or a weapon that shoots one at a time, like a Kraber, Mastiff, Peacekeeper, Wingman, and so on and so forth. Now, as I had just mentioned a moment ago, Apex is on a low tick rate. It is actually one of the lowest tick rate games out there. It is on 24 tick. So there are many times and a lot of different ways where you can die in this game through low tick rate. So with jiggle peeking, you could shoot this guy and be around the wall for like half a second on your screen and still die, because on their screen you are actually still peeking out. So the only way really to get the advantage of the low tick rate is to honestly just play the game a lot and to get a really good understanding of how the tick rate works, as it's extremely hard to actually explain aside from what I had just done. So Apex is roughly about half a second to a second behind what you're actually doing. So if I scope in and look at this person for about like half a second after I do it, I am still here and then scoped in while I'm already shooting at him. Which is why a lot of the time it can seem like you come around the corner and immediately start spraying on you, because on their screen they're about a half a second ahead of you. But same works vice versa. It's rather weird, but that's the best way I can explain it. Now, another big and important piece of the mechanics in this game that I cover a lot in my movement video, so I wasn't sure whether to include this or not, but I figured I may as well. That is to gain high ground in any places where possible. Say if I were to fight this enemy here, always obtain high ground in all places possible, as it constantly gives you the advantage more times. So always, where possible, obtain high ground upon your enemy. Now, the final way to improve in Apex Legends, after you have watched the movement tutorial video, practice your positioning, your general movement, and realize that a lot of the game sense and decision making is going to come with time from playing the game. The last thing, and arguably, in my opinion at least, the second most important thing after movement is aim. I say arguably because aim can be more important than movement a lot of the time, and controllers have proven that. So the way that I would say is best to practice your aim in Apex Legends is either one of two sources. You can either actually hop onto Apex Legends and you can go into the firing range, pick your weapons. They have the gun is here. You can run around and just practice hitting shots all day long. Doesn't matter. You can go through practice snapping back and forth from the targets. You have a blast doing that. And then the other method for practicing your aim in Apex Legends is a really well-known aiming software known as Kovacs. Now, Kovacs is extremely useful as there are many different scenarios that you can use and that there are to assist people. And I know that myself personally, I do not use any aim training software. However, there are a lot of extremely good players and extremely good aimers that I know that play Apex and that I play with who constantly use Kovacs and use it to practice their aim and harness it all the time. Now, in Kovacs, there is a very important thing to do before you just hop on and you practice aim. Once you have your aim set on Apex Legends, what you're going to need to do is I will have a link in the description to a video showing how to transfer your exact inch by inch sensitivity from Apex into the actual Kovacs settings to where you quite literally have it to the pinpoint exact accuracy of Apex Legends. So that way, every single thing that you train in here will be 100% accurate to how it is whenever you play Apex Legends. So that way, you can practice a lot of different types of testing of aim, like you have tracking there, you have the fast strafing bot here, which can be really tiring on your arms. You have the small dots on the wall that you have to flick back and forth and try to hit. There are many different and extremely useful aim trainers that will harness your reaction time and get you extremely good hand-eye coordination with reaction time. So I would highly recommend using these trainers, especially Kovacs, as it is arguably the best right now, and you can get the pinpoint exact sensitivity from Apex onto Kovacs. So aside from movement, decision making, and game sense, aim is the second or first most important thing in Apex, and you can literally practice your aim by going through and just purchasing Kovacs on Steam for $10. That is a pretty cheap price for a software that you can use for more games than just Apex to get pinpoint accuracy. But since this is a video about Apex, we are of course talking about Apex. So you can get exact measurements, and it is definitely worth the money to practice your aim. And with that being said, that is everything that I can show to help with general improvement aside from movement, because movement and aim are really the two most important parts about improving in Apex. So after getting better movement and watching the movement video and After practicing your aim to the point where you get extremely good aim, combined good movement and good aim, and then continue to play the game and get your um, game sense and decision making down, you will be a god in no time. Now, I'm going to get this out of the way here as I feel like it is a low-hanging fruit that must be known. A major way to improve in Apex Legends is to understand your line of sight, which I go pretty far in depth in explaining in my movement tutorial video in the link in the description. And the other things are game sense and your decision making. Now, it's almost impossible to explain somebody how to improve their game sense and their decision making because there's really only one way to realistically do that, and that is to play the game. And whenever you make a mistake or you die, look back on how you died. Question yourself on how you could have played it differently, maybe even question friends who you look up to or consider really well and ask them what they would have done in the situation. But it's best a lot of the time to just figure out how you messed up and how you think it's better to handle the situation. So that way you do that enough times to the point where it clicks in your head and you eventually start making the right decisions. And with more time in the game, you start getting a better game sense and a general idea for your surroundings and what's going on and what is the best decision to make. So when it comes to general decision making and game sense, the real only logical answer or answers to give to improve on those is to continue to play, and every time you die and or make a mistake, think about how you could have avoided that or how you could have played better instead of immediately going to what a large majority of people do, that blaming their loot, the RNG, or their teammates, especially when solo queuing. Yes, all three of those can be pretty solid reasons to a death, but still, if you wish to improve, always look towards yourself and where you could have improved, regardless of what you were really given. Try to improve and be the best with what you have. Another piece of advice that I would give on how to improve on Apex Legends is knowing when to run and when to fight. Now, a lot of people on Apex end up developing what we call hero syndrome. Hero syndrome is essentially your typical TTV Wraith, basically like me, except I try to not do this, where whenever both of her teammates are down, they would much rather run in and attempt to 1v3 rather than get to an area of safety or get to high ground or try to lurk, grab teammates' banners, res the teammates, and then proceed to take the fight. Because this is Apex Legends, and sure, a single person can be extremely good, but a full squad is much more powerful than any lone person. A extremely good player with teammates is immediately stronger than if they were by themselves. So remember, it's not just you playing. Know when to run and know when to fight. Don't take every engagement you see just because it's there. Know when you actually need to run and back off and heal, and when it's actually time to fight, and when you can't run and your back is against the wall, so you must fight. Now, another way to improve in general, and this is getting less from words of advice and how the game genuinely works to more so something to actually try out, and that is the different meta weapons in the game of Apex and characters. Find yourself a character that you really enjoy, whether that be Bangalore, Crypto, Revenant, Octane, Wraith, Lifeline, even a Rampart. It doesn't matter. Pick a character that you really enjoy, and if you wish to main them or get extremely good with them, main them and stick with them and do not leave them. Obviously, don't be afraid to play other characters, but the more you play of one character, the more you master said character. Then, once you have your character picked and you have a character that you really like and you learn their abilities, what they're good at, what they're not good at, and you have them mastered, there is also weapon mastery. Now, myself, for example, my weapon or my cocktail of choice is the R99, and I also love to pick up the Mastiff or the Wingman. Now, the primary weapon for me will always be the R99. It is the weapon that I have trained many games, and out of my almost 40,000 kills, almost half of them come from SMGs alone, just because of how much I use the R99 and other SMGs alike. So my R99 spray, recoil control, and how well I can handle it in all situations is extremely high because it is the weapon I chose. Now, for example, there are other meta weapons like the Wingman, which is also another extremely good option to choose. The Flatline is extremely good. The Hemlock is extremely good. The Mastiff, obviously, is extremely good. The R301 is extremely good. There are many meta weapons in the Hall of Apex Legends to choose from, to where you can pick them up, get extremely good with them, and essentially master them. And once you get your aim down with these weapons really well, it can help out with weapons of different types, because most weapons in the game have a different recoil pattern. So pick a character that you really enjoy playing, main that character or play them as much as possible, and then also find your favorite weapons to use, especially if they are meta weapons, and use them as much as you possibly can so you can get as good with them as possible. Even if it's the Wingman and you're hitting only like 1 out of 8 shots a mag, you use it enough and eventually those 1 out of 8 shots or 1 out of 10 shots will turn into like 4 out of 10 shots and then 5 out of 10 shots until the point to where you're hitting very consistently with the Wingman and you become a force to be reckoned with, that even the scariest of players would have to respect it. Now, I had mentioned a little earlier on, whenever I was explaining to look at yourself for game sense and decision making, a lot of that also determines somebody's skill level. The way that skill is logically determined is how many disadvantages a single person can have and still win. So, for example, a player with a purple armor and a Mastiff versus a white armor P2020, both playing, let's say, Pathfinder, for example. If the dude with the P2020 wins, then that means he is either A, just a much better player than the other Pathfinder, or B, the Pathfinder is just really not good, meaning he would need an absurd amount of advantages to win any sort of engagement. Because a good player, I'm going to take at random, let's say Shiv FPS. If you give Shiv a Wingman, no armor, and you put him up against a blue armor R99 Wraith, there is a good chance that he will still win that engagement because his skill level is so high to the point that he can have major disadvantages and still win. the fight, deeming him a good player because the amount of disadvantages you can have and still come out on top is a determiner of skill. So, whenever you land on a building and you don't really get much, if you're able to still capitalize on it and do a lot with little, then that just goes to show how much your skill level is actually improving and how little you need to rely on super crazy good weapons off drops like a Mastiff and Purple Armor, for example. Now, how to actually join the Apex Discord is rather simple. What you are going to want to do is open up your Discord and go down here to explore public servers. It will be the last option that you have. And then here there will be all of the official communities and other super big communities and partners and everything like that. So you would just go up here, type in Apex Legends, and then right here there is 4,000 members in this Discord, or 400,000 members with about 100,000 online, and then you click it and here you are. You would be in the Discord. Just hit join, that would pop up here at the top, and then you are ready to go. You now have a Discord to look for people. Now, another way to improve and to have a much better time playing Apex is actually rather simple, believe it or not. That way is finding people to play with. Now, a lot of people obviously are going to have a hard time finding people to play with, but there is actually a full-blown popular official Apex Legends Discord literally based around finding people to play with, whether it be in pubs, ranked, or if you are on PC or either console, it doesn't matter, and your region does not matter, it supports all. So for example, if I wanted to hop on in to play a game, I can scroll through here and let's see, there's this dude wanting people to play. There's people that also have badge requirements to join, meaning they want people who are rather good. This man is looking for a 1v1 as long as you're over level 100. There are many different types of lobbies and people that you will find. Not all experiences will be good or chill, but the majority of them you'll at least be able to play with other people to have voice comms and try to practice and get better with teammates. So finding people to play with and having a squad to actually have your back so you're not losing your mind playing with randoms all the time will really help you continue to want to play the game, gather friends, and give you a reason to want to get better to either impress your friends or to be better than maybe even some of your friends that you play with. So, in a lot of ways, finding people to play with, though three stacking is frowned upon in Apex, if you want to just play more casually or find people that you get along with or you have a good time with and play the game, then they can get over themselves and find people to play with and actually get friends. So do not be scared to three stack and do not be scared to make friends. Apex Legends is a game that you go in with a squad of three. It is meant for you to find friends and people to play with.